Computer. Hey Chargers, Coach Coop here. Today we get to hear from my friend and former college teammate Dani Moreno. Dani currently runs professionally for Adidas Terrex and has accolades that include a third place finish at this year's Team USA selection race. She was the first American to podium at OCC with a third place finish, and she's a four-time Team USA member. In high school, she ran 17:59 at the state meet, finishing in ninth place. She ran 17:47 at Mount Sac and 17:22 at Woodbridge. In the 2 miles, she ran 10:57 and 5:07 in the mile. She went on to run at UCSB and ran 16:33 for her fastest 5K. And just last year, she ran a blazing fast 1:10:45 half marathon, which is 5:24 pace for 13.1 miles. Hey, Dani, how are you?
Hey, I'm just so glad to be here.
I love it. So I wanted to start asking you about longevity in the sport. We kind of already talked about how you've run at a very high level for almost 20 years now. So tell us how you do it.
Yeah, that's a really hard question to answer. It honestly wasn't until our little side conversation before the start of this recording that I realized how long I've actually been running for. But I would say the big thing for me is that I just absolutely love it. I think it's super fun. It's a problem that can never be solved, which I find super interesting. It's something that the output is what you put into it. And so through the different phases of my life, I've kind of messed with kind of like that knob or that turn of how far like dedicated do I want to be towards the sport in the day-to-day practice, high school, college, post-college, and now I would say adult life almost. Um, and so yeah, I would say the biggest thing is meeting myself where I'm at and picking things that still excite me in relation to running has probably been the biggest factors that have contributed to my longevity. That and honestly, learning to eat a lot and stay hydrated.
Yeah, that makes sense. And we talked a little bit before about kind of your progress through high school and how, specifically with Woodbridge, your times progressed. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that kind of helped you develop as a woman and as a runner?
Yeah, definitely. So kids, I started running in high school in the year 2006, so almost 14 years ago at this point. And so in 2006, my ninth grade time at Woodbridge was 17:38, which was pretty fast for a freshman. I honestly don't know how fast freshmen are running these days, but after I ran that time, I actually got a lot of collegiate letters already, like trying to recruit me to different colleges and stuff. And then between the summer going into my sophomore year, I started to go through puberty. So my body started to change, hormones, etc. In my sophomore race at Woodbridge, I actually ran 18:18, which was about 30 seconds slower. Junior year, sung the same tune, ran 18:23, so a couple seconds slower. By no means a slow time, just compared to my freshman results there. And then finally, my senior year, I ran 17:22, just as your coach just said. So finally beating my freshman self. And yeah, I have to say that at that time in college, when I was going into my sophomore year, that was probably one of four times in my life that I actually considered quitting running altogether. And I would say it was incredibly difficult because I had a lot of voices in fellow teammates and girls my age telling me to give up, to be honest, that I was done, I was never gonna be fast again because that was their experience. But luckily, I also had some really formative and great mentors in my cross country coach and the assistant coach who really pushed me to persevere and that this was a moment in life, that it wasn't forever, and that the changes that my body was going through was actually going to make me faster and stronger. So yeah, going into, sophomore year was really tough. That whole year was tough. But I stuck with it and I'm really glad I did. And then junior year, I thought I had, finished the comeback and I ran slower. So you could only imagine like how tough that was to feel that the year had already been so hard the previous year. But again, I was lucky enough to have really supportive coaches who understood women's physiology and that I had to push through it and understand that it was going to be a net positive. And so yeah, I remember the summer going into my senior year, I just felt like my body had become my own again and I was stronger in the workouts. I would do these grass laps out by our high school and like I was starting to run PRs and that's when everything started to click and then senior year ended up being pretty magical.
That's awesome. And you talked a little bit about how kind of the mental side of that and how you had inputs, kind of two different inputs. So could we talk a little more about how you visualize and mentally prepare for like leading up to a race and also how or if that has changed throughout your career?
Yes, I would say it more or less has stayed roughly the same, in that I visualize. Like, I think to me, visualizing is one of the most powerful and useful tools you can have as a runner because for us, our sport is our body and the power that our body produces, and trying to be as economically efficient as possible in that power being produced. You don't want it going sideways. You want to try and have the force going forward, which do your form drills, do your strengthening, that helps all of that. And so for me, the next most powerful tool, I would say the most powerful is actually your mind and getting your mind in the right place. And so the first question I usually ask myself is, are you excited to race? And if you aren't, ask yourself why. Most of the time, if you're not, it's because you're scared. And you have to ask yourself why you're scared. Uh, and then it's that, I mean, that in it itself is a whole Zoom recording on its own, but I would say more times than not, there's no reason for us to be scared. It's usually some form of like being scared of failure and stuff like that. When actually every race result that you have is progress. So backing to the visualization, what I'm trying to visualize is the course and how I want to feel. Not how I look, not anybody else in the race. It's just like, what feelings do I want to have? And most of the time, it's happy, excited, and then truly believing that I'm tougher than anyone else on the start line. So when the going gets tough, bet on yourself. And so imagining the race being maybe easy, but also for me, more times than not, I'm visualizing the race being the hardest thing I've ever done. And then preparing myself so when it does get hard, it's something that I've already visited in my mind before. It's familiar and actually excites me because it's my chance to prove that, I can win the race or, do whatever I want to do. So, yeah, visualizing the course and how I want to feel.
I love that. So you kind of talked about this already, but do you have like you pull out the visualization when you get to the point of the race where it hurts and there's still maybe mile and a half, 2 miles to go in a cross country race. Do you have other like things you pull out of the toolkit or do you have like mantras or what do you do mostly like to get yourself to the finish line when it maybe you want to quit?
Yeah, I think when the going gets tough, it's about disassociating that pain that you might be feeling at a physiological level, so like the actual lactic building in your legs and stuff, and trying to disassociate it as something that is separate from your body and that the body can actually keep going. So it's more of like you're driving a car and you're like sitting in your head, that's the car, and telling yourself to keep going because you can. Um, and so, yeah, when the going gets tough, it's truly believing that you can keep going. So I honestly will talk to myself out loud, as silly as that may sound, to say, like, keep going, keep pushing. Just very, very simple phrases like, let's go, Dani, let's go. And I'm very nice to myself in like the self-belief. And I think talking out loud is actually more powerful than keeping it inside. When it's inside, it doesn't feel like reality, at least sometimes to me. When you're racing, when you say it out loud, it's like bringing your attention span back to the racing that is actually occurring. And this doesn't mean you need to be yelling like, let's go, Dani. You can, you definitely can. But even just something like under your breath, like, let's go, Dani. You got this. You're tough. Let's go. I find to be really helpful.
I love that. All right, so shifting a little, but still the mental side, and maybe physical if you feel that too. But do you have strategies for how to get through mental or physical burnout?
Yeah, I would say, as you mentioned, I've been running most of my life now than I haven't at a competitive level. And uh, yeah, no one is immune to mental burnout. I think it's just about meeting yourself where you're at. So I would say the first things to check are actually the basics. Am I getting enough sleep? Am I eating enough? Am I drinking water? Am I staying hydrated? Because you're not only like the absolute basics of what we do is like we're a human trying to function. And then you layer on top of that that you're going to practice every day. You're going to go train and run. So if you're not taking the basics at a basic level, how do you then expect your body to then add these extra things that go beyond what the average person may do? Because I will tell you, the average person isn't running more than a mile, if that, on a normal day. So check to make sure you're sleeping, eating and hydrating. If it then is beyond that and you're feeling like it's a tough go, I would say communicate to your coach how you're feeling because the importance of a coach is they have a bird's eye view. So when they're planning your training and thinking about what an athlete may or may not need leading up to a race or races, they should have an idea of when you may start to feel tired if they're planning your training. So if you go to your coach and you're like, "Hey, I'm feeling a little tired today," and they're like, "Okay, that makes sense." And some many times than not, the coach can explain, "That's because we did this on Tuesday and we did this on Thursday. So if this is expected, then maybe your body just needs some more of those basics, more food, more water, etc." If you're feeling tired multiple days in a row or weeks and you're telling, again, tell your coach the first time you feel tired, because then the coach can start to really take in those inputs and be like, okay, maybe that's too much for this athlete. And so by communicating with your coach, it's more of like a partnership. Um, and then beyond that, if you really are really tired, then you just go to your coach and you say, I need a break. But that is the last thing you do. The first thing is the first set of communication.
I love that. More communication is always better.
Yes.
And then for like the joy side, because you talked about how, with running for this long, you do, I think you talked about this, you do it for the love of it. And so I'm just wondering if there's things you do to keep that joy alive.
Uh, that's both a complex and easy answer because I do love running. Like I just love it. It feels like something I was born to do. Um, it provides me with this level of happiness and groundedness that no other thing can. As far as sport, obviously I have my loving relationships, but it's so nice for the mind, both like mentally, emotionally, spiritually. It just feels like everything comes together when I run. So that in itself is quite special. Um, and so for me, when I feel that my running is lacking joy, the first thing I will do is reach out to a friend to go on a run with them because that to me is the next, if not equal, best thing about running is the community and kind of this shared love for something that feels intrinsically very human. I think humans were born to run. That's not just me. Like I feel that emotional connection, but I think most humans, all humans are born to run. And when you do it with another person, you guys just like, you just share energy, you talk about life, it's meditative collectively, which I think is very powerful. And then the last aspect is that I just love competing too. I love testing myself. I love seeing how far I can go with just my body and a pair of shoes. Like running is so cool in that way. I love other sports too, but they're more game-like because you're usually manipulating some sort of apparatus like a ball, a bat, something. Whereas with running, it's literally just you against the terrain, the course, the world. And that to me is really an opportunity to ask yourself and frame yourself like, what do I bring to the table? There's nothing quite as raw and stripped down as running, and that to me brings a lot of joy to find out what am I made of.
I love that. All right, my last question, unless you have more things you'd like to share with us, but if you could send a message to high school Dani, what would you tell her?
That is a great question. Uh, one, It's hard. I probably wouldn't tell her much, to be honest. My high school years, I'd probably just like blend into the cheers, people cheering on the side and clap her on because like my sophomore year felt like in that moment the hardest thing I'd ever faced in my life. This thing that had come admittedly pretty effortlessly was taken away from me, and it felt unfair, even though I was going through something that was very natural and beautiful, and overall, again, net positive for the running, strength and stuff. But it was really, really hard not to give up. And so the amount of tenacity and perseverance I gained from just sticking with something that was really hard has played so much into my overall character as an adult and taking on really hard challenges for the rest of my life. Like that to me was one of the most formative challenges I've ever taken on. So, yeah, I'd probably just cheer her on. She's doing the right thing. And I will say there's nothing quite like being part of a group of women, or maybe it's men, like just being part of a team that all is on the same page. Because my high school team was one of those special groups of people, in this case, a bunch of women or young girls who all wanted the same thing, and that was to be the best we possibly could be. And going from not making state, so we were in Division One Southern Section. The previous year, I think we had just missed state. We were like 11th place. I forget what the placings were and stuff. The next year, we then almost won the Southern Section finals. We were second, missed by a couple points. And then we made it to the state finals, and we missed winning by like 10 points. We were fourth place. First through fourth were separated by 10 points. And that was done in just a year. And that to me was one of the most, yeah, favorite teams and favorite summers I've ever had of my entire life because we all agreed that would be really cool. So yeah, that to me was one of the most special things.
I love that. It's all about the journey, right? And
Yeah,
yeah, high school teams are pretty special.
yeah, couldn't agree more.
Well, thank you so much for your insights. And maybe when you're in Santa Barbara next, we could get you out here in person. But yeah, thanks for sharing.
That sounds great. Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right.